Hi everyone, this is Michael Griffith,
And Mitchell Williams.
and we're going to be talking to you about the eBay hack of 2014. So first we're going to go over the timeline. Attackers gained access in late February and early March of 2013. And immediately after doing that, they started taking customer information until the breach was discovered in early May of 2014. After the breach had been noted and then contained, eBay notified users of the attack in late May, and then investigations started to determine their attack and the damage caused. When you ask the question of how did the attackers gain access, it's actually they did it through compromising employee credentials. It occurred around late February of 2013, and the most accepted belief is that the credentials were acquired through social engineering, essentially phishing, and they wanted to gain access to few things, and there's a few things they did get away with. It is believed that they took names, email addresses, the physical addresses, phone numbers, date of birth, and encrypted passwords of over 145 million eBay users. eBay went on to disclose that PayPal, which is the financial arm of eBay, was not compromised. So luckily, no banking information was stolen. People's credit was secured. eBay sent messages to all the users urging them to change their passwords when the breach was discovered. They then contacted cybersecurity experts and law enforcement to investigate the breach and determine if there were any legal remedies possible. In 4 states, which is Florida, Connecticut, Illinois, and California, opened investigations into eBay's security practices. No reports from the 4 states have come forward blaming eBay, and it was generally accepted by security experts that because of how the release of the breach occurred, that it most likely they were not negligent, and it was just pure luck and bad practice on the employees' parts, but not on the eBay board of directors.
So, having looked at how the attack happened and what came as a result of it, in the second part of the presentation, we'll be looking at the eBay attack and retrospective concepts we've learned about in class, and applying the 4 layers of defense to see what steps could be taken to avoid large cyber attacks like this. First off, however, we'd like to discuss some things that were properly handled on eBay's end that stopped this attack from being even more disastrous. For one, eBay noted that while user passwords, phone numbers, and addresses were compromised, user credit card and other financial information was stored in a separate container, keeping it safe from the hands of the attackers. Similarly, they also mentioned that their partnered online payment service, PayPal, was totally unaffected by the attack, keeping all financial information linked to eBay there safe as well. In addition, although all user passwords are compromised, they were stored in the database encrypted, meaning that they were not readable in plain text, and they had an extra layer of security protecting them. Moving on, we'll now be discussing strategies that eBay may have used to prevent this attack from happening in the first place. In terms of topics discussed in class, these strategies will focus mainly on the deception and frustration layers of defense. As we know, these layers apply before the attacker has successfully reached the network. So for our first strategy, we'd have suggested that eBay create fake, honeypot-esque databases. These databases could be filled with either false or garbled user information that would be completely useless to an attacker simply stumbling through the network trying to find resources to attack. These honeypot databases may also be able to report any connections made to them to the network's defenders. Our other strategy for how eBay could have prevented this attack from happening is for them to increase and upgrade their network architecture with various security tools. For example, by adding a proxy or gateway to the network partition with user information database on it, connections and traffic coming through that portion of the network would be monitored and keep the database safe by not letting all connections through. Similarly, by adding a firewall here, you would filter out unwanted visitors, even if they were on an employee account. Generally, it's strange that such a crucial part of their network had very few measures in place to secure it. Also, a VPN could be used to secure the user database as well as other network resources. While the adversary did use employee credentials to log into eBay's network, they had launched their attack off-campus. By having a VPN that employees would have to log into when working away from the company, the attacker would have had an extra layer of defense to get through before they would have been able to access any company resources. Next, we'll be taking a look at how eBay could prevent future cyber attacks from happening by discussing strategies that involve employing methods found in the resisting and recognizing or responding layers of defense. As we know, our assumption when reaching these layers is that the attacker has gotten into the network. Our first strategy here would be for eBay to improve their management policies and practices. We've discussed implementing separation of role in an organization so that different sections in the organization have access to different sections of information. In terms of this attack, with a separation of role in place, even if the attacker was able to obtain the login credentials of a corporate employee, there's no guarantee that the account they hijacked would be privy to user information. Additionally, adding in a need-to-know policy would serve a similar function, but have a guardian in place that would have a final say as to whether or not an employee requesting access to the user information database would get that access or not. Otherwise, an access control list or more strict user privileges would also secure the database. With this method, the database could be set up such that all but a select few employees would have the ability to access or read the records stored within. Our second strategy to help eBay prevent future attacks of this nature would be to implement an IDPS on the network. As we know, because the attacker obtained corporate employee credentials, this was essentially an insider attack. Unfortunately, because of that, a traditional IDPS that would monitor incoming connections to the network at large would essentially be useless. However, by placing an IDPS inside of the portion of the network with the user information database, network defenders would be alerted as soon as someone, even an employee, tried to access it. This strategy would also specifically target the issue of the attacker having access to the system for a whole 229 days by giving a sign that an employee account had been potentially compromised. Finally, our last strategy to help eBay prevent future cyber attacks would be to improve eBay's email system and educate employees. As we know, in defending information, there is an asymmetry between an attacker being able to use a best effort or sum of efforts to break through, while the defender has to rely on their weakest link to keep safe, and humans are often that weakest link, being susceptible to social engineering. As this attack was the result of a spear phishing attempt, educating employees about potential threats and warning them to never give out their login credentials would likely go a long way in stopping a potential cyber attack. Additionally, encrypting outgoing emails would help as well. Even if a spear phishing attempt was successful, if the response an employee sent out was encrypted, the information the adversary gained would be potentially useless unless they had the proper key to decrypt the message. Lastly, using two-factor authentication could also block a potential socially engineered cyber attack by requiring the adversary to have access to the employee's authentication device in order to fully log into the network. In conclusion, this cyber attack exemplifies the importance of proper information security and how susceptible even large corporations are to these kinds of threats. It is simply astonishing that an attacker was able to grab hold of 3 corporate employees' login credentials and use them to compromise 145 million users' personal information for a whopping 229 days without being detected. Now, while eBay did have some measures in place, notably having encrypted the stored user passwords and keeping user financial records in a separate container, they definitely could have improved their security to have prevented this attack from ever happening. While the asymmetry of defense left eBay at the mercy of their weakest link, people, by looking at the 4 layers of defense and utilizing them, we can see how eBay's security methodologies may be improved.
Thank you all, and we hope you enjoyed.